Okay, in this video, I'd like to go over more with arrays, um, different methods that are built into an array. And when I say method, I mean things that I can access using the dot. So if I have, well, before I get into that, let me mention one thing that I've been meaning to get to. So in JavaScript before, we had a way of defining variables with var, and I was able to say var array equals 1, 2, 3. And here's an array of numbers. Well, let me make them slightly different numbers. I'll make it 10, 32, 35, and 7. How about that? And there's my array. And I can say console.log, and I can look at my array. If I run that, I can see in my console my array here, and my 3 elements. So that was declaring a variable and initializing it by setting a value to it in one line. We have a different way, a more modern way of declaring our variables. We actually have a couple things that we can do. If we want, we use the word immutable. So if you are unable to mute it, or if it's immutable, that basically, more like the word mute, not like turning off the volume, but kind of like mutation, change it. If it's immutable, it's unchangeable. So if you wanted something that you didn't want to be able to change, you could use const for constant and declare it that way. And then I believe if you tried to change that later in your code, you would get some sort of an error. I mean, I guess I can try that. So I'll say r element 0, set that to 1. And let's see if that'll do anything. Alright, I guess I didn't get an error. Or can I set that equal to a different array? Maybe that'll work. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Okay, so you do get an error in this case. Let me see if I can make this bigger for you. It said invalid assignment to constant r. The reason for that is because it's supposed to be constant. You're not supposed to be able to change it to something else. That's particularly useful if you don't want that to change. So in case you make some code up at the top of the file and you use a variable name, and then later on in the file you forgot that you already used that variable name or something like that, and you try to change what it's set to, in this case it will tell you don't do that. There's a way to sort of protect your namespace here. But you may not know right away if you want that value to change or not throughout the program. In general, just to be safe, you could use let instead. So in math, we often say let x equals 3, and then you know to plug in 3 for x. So this works just like var, except it is a different 3 letters. We use let, and that works just fine. You can create a variable, reassign it. It works fine. The difference between let and var is something having to do with scope. So I haven't talked a lot about scope, but for instance, if I say function and I define a function like happy, and we have a function going on in here, where I define the variables, basically I could be inside of this block of code, inside of these curly brackets, or I could be outside, or I could be in an if statement inside of the function definition. So this is one level of scope, the global scope. Then I could be at a lower scope or an even deeper scope. Basically, let is more like other programming languages than var, and it respects scoping a little bit more. So if you want the way it feels to program in JavaScript to feel like programming in other languages, which is probably what you do want, because that way when you learn how to do things in JavaScript and you pick up a different language, or vice versa, you want all the way you do things might be a little bit different, but the general rules are kind of the same. Then you probably want to use let. And so from here on out, I'm going to use let instead of var. I could have changed all my vars in previous videos to lets and everything would work just fine. So I'll just mention that now. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to use from now on to declare my variables. I'm just going to use let. Okay, so this video I want to go over things that you can do with arrays. So here's one array, and I'm going to make another array, R2, and I'll just call it A, B, and H. There we go. What are things that I can do with my arrays? Well, if I save this and I run it, I should only see the one of them. 1035.7, that's good. If I did R2, ABH, I could just look at both of them, and I'll get an array and then another array. One of them's 1035.7, one of them's ABH. But what can I do with this? Well, I'm going to start with messing with the first array. I can change the value of the first element by referencing the 0th index, and I can set that to a 1. And if I save that and run it, I've now changed the first element to a 1. So I can reassign things in this way. I could also just, I think I did this in the last one, just say, what is the 0th element? It's 10. So that's one thing I could do. I could also, I could do dot push, so that's one of my methods. I can push something into my list, and it comes in at the end. So if I put in a 500, and I look at what that list is, I now have a 500 at the end. So I can populate my list by pushing things in at the end. Another thing I could do is I could say pop. So pop removes things from the list, but it also returns it. So if I say r.pop and I don't say anything else, then it's going to pop the 7 off, and thing will become 7. So I should see a 7 if I look at thing. But then when I look at my array, it's going to be just 1035. 7 got popped off. So let's see how that looks. There we go. My first thing that console logs is thing, which is 7. That's what I popped off. And what's left is here, the array, with only 2 elements now. So that's how pop works, and that's how push works. I also have shift. This, I believe, will remove the 10 instead of the 7. Yeah, so I popped off, well, I guess I could say I shifted off the 10, and now I have 2 values in my array, but this time I pulled it off the beginning of the array. So there you go. There's ways of deleting things. There's another way to delete things. I could say delete R1. So I'm going to delete the 35. That works. Thing. Okay, I deleted it, so I better get rid of it here. Okay, so I have removed the 35, but notice there's an empty slot. So I have 10, nothing, and then a 7. So I did delete the 35, but it left a gap. It left a hole there. So it's not maybe the most elegant way to remove something from a list, but it is a way to remove something from a list. So you see my indices. I have a list of length 3. 0th element is 10. First element is not listed. Second element is 7. So I don't know. I don't usually use that method, but that does work. So how could I? So I know how to remove something from the beginning. I know how to remove something from the end. How would I remove something from the middle? Well, in that case, we're going to say r.splice, and I need 2 numbers here. the first number is going to be where do I want to start cutting, and I want to remove the 35. So this is 0, this is 1. So I'm going to say start at index 1 and remove one thing. So that should remove the 35 if I remember what I'm doing. Let's see. There we go. I removed it, and I don't have that hole. I don't have that gap anymore. I could remove two things after starting at 1, and I get 10. Can I remove 3? I don't know what will happen if I try to do too many. I guess it doesn't hurt, so whatever. So that's how that works. I could start at 0 and remove two things. Oops. And that should only leave me with my 7. Very good. So that's splice. It works pretty well. What else can I do? I can, here's an odd word. This is how it looks. Concatenate, I believe is how you spell it. Concatenate is to basically put them together. That's pretty much what it means. So what can I do with that? Well, I can say concat r.concat, and then what do I want to put together with this? R2. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, that's confused me. This, when I say r.concat and R2, what it should do is put these into both sets. So 10, it should make a new array, 10, 35, 7, A, B, H. It should put it all as one. I believe it has done that, but I was wrong in thinking that it would set that thing to R. So it generated that new thing that's a combination of the two, but I don't have that stored in a variable. So I guess I need to make a name for that. So let's call this let new R equal, and then I'm going to say take the first thing and join with it the second thing. Now I want to look at what is new R, because regular R hasn't changed, but I want to know what this new thing is. And there it is. I got a 6-element array, and it just put them together. Pretty good. Alright, now I've got another thing. I believe I can just do join. I'm not sure if I know what I'm doing. Let's save that, and I'll refresh. And now what it's done is it's generated that list, but when I say .join, it's going to put them together separated by commas by default. And it's turned it into a string, so this is text. It's not an array. I don't have items in a list. This is just letters or symbols. So I don't have to separate them with a comma. I could separate them with a with a space. So I'm just going to put in a space, and that's what I get. I could separate them with a dash, and that's what I get. I could separate them with a smiley face, and that's what I get. So you can join them into a single text object in that way. So join is quite nice. Let's see what other methods I have. So concat, we did pop, we did delete, we did push, and shift. What else do I want to cover? We did splice. Slice, I don't use that one a lot. Slice out a piece of an array into a new array. Oh, okay. Well, I thought splice did that. Okay. Maybe the difference here between slice and splice is one returns something. So let me take a look at splice again. Here it is. Returns an array with the deleted items. Okay. And slice. I don't really get the difference here. Anyway, I'll just skip over that. What else? I think that's pretty good. One thing I will point out also, weird, is a lot of this works somewhat similarly for a string. So you can kind of think of a string like, well, I'll leave all this the way it is, except I'm not going to look at it. But let's do all the same thing now with strings. So I'm going to say let str equal, and then quotes, I'm going to put 10, comma, 35, comma, 7. And then I'll say let string 2 equals a, comma, b, comma, h. So I'm now doing it with strings instead of arrays. So what can I do? Well, here's something I can do. So let's just see what string it gives me. When I say what is the string, it gives me 10, comma, 35, comma, 7. Very good. What can I do? I can say string dot concat string 2. What do I get? It puts them together. But in this case, it put them together without a comma in between them. So that's one thing that you can do. I think, can I do join? How does that work? Okay, so string.join doesn't work. I forget how this works. What if I just do join like this with nothing in it? Did I say that? String.join. It isn't like that. Can I do this then? String.join str2. I'm not sure that I know what I'm doing. Nope, that didn't work either. Okay, so I forget join. JavaScript. I'm going to try a couple things. I might be thinking of a different language. Can I do this? No? Okay, I'm thinking of different languages. It isn't this, is it? I'm pretty sure it's not. Okay, so let me show you what you can do. I can say str dot, I think it's splice. Can I do splice? When I save it like that, it doesn't really work. I think I gotta give it something. I could give it an empty quote, and that didn't work. If I do space, that won't work. What if I do a comma? Oh, it's split. I'm sorry. It's split. If I split with nothing in there, it splits everything up. So instead of 10, comma, 35, comma, 7, it's going to do 1, comma, 0, comma, 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 3, comma, 5, comma, 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 7. So it split everything into its own little partition. If I did it with space, it's going to break everything up whenever there's a space into new elements. And there is no space, so everything is just one element in this array. So split makes an array out of a string. If I did it with a comma, it's going to cut it at the comma places. So if I run that, I now have an array with 10, 35, 7. So I converted my string into an array. That's pretty nice. And then you can use your array methods like we were talking about. So you can take a string, split it up into an array, and then use your array methods. Anyway, what else can I do with the string? I can say string dot, I don't think I can do push. I could add the letter X. Let's see if that works. Well, I'll put it on its own line, and then I'll say what is string. I don't think it's going to like this. Good, okay. It didn't like that. But how can I add a letter to the end of my string? I can say plus equals X. And now I've added an X to the end of my string. Or I could do comma X if I want to add another comma. There we go. So I've just kind of added it in. This isn't the one that I can do this, is it? I don't know what language I'm thinking of, but no, okay. I don't know. There's a language where you can do this and it puts things together. Maybe it's Python? I don't know. So that's how you can tack things onto a string. You can also iterate over a string. So if I have that word equals hamburger, I can say for letter of word. This is a different type of for loop that I need to explain in a future video, but I can say console.log letter. I'm gonna get rid of that one. So now it just individually iterates through the word hamburger and it prints each letter. So just like we could iterate over, I could say word, well, I don't want to do all that. You can iterate over an array just like you can iterate over a string. So that's kind of nice. What else do we have? I think that's pretty good for arrays. You can have arrays nested inside of arrays. I'll do that in a different video. I think that's pretty good for arrays. So those are the methods that you have for arrays.